Welcome back. You're still watching Citizen TV. This is a Power Breakfast. Remember to use the hashtag Power Breakfast. Now, over 10,000 delegates from different countries are attending the 14th session of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development at the KICC here in Nairobi. The week-long conference kicked off yesterday and is expected to discuss various matters to do with international trade. Now, for Kenya's tourism industry, it is a much welcome boost. For city residents, it could mean some traffic inconvenience. But what exactly is UNCTAD? And what does it mean for Kenya to host this global conference? Now, this morning we're privileged to host none other than the Secretary General of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, Dr Mukhisa Kituyi. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes. Now, help us understand what exactly is UNCTAD and what is its mandate?
Okay. On the 16th of June 1964, after 3 months of wrangling and threats by developing countries to pull out of the UN, a specialized UN organization was established, mostly driven by developing countries, whose primary responsibility is how to assist developing countries integrate into the world economy gainfully. Since then, it has been our main responsibility within the UN family as the agency that drives development cooperation. How do we identify vulnerabilities of developing countries? How can we help them to grow? How can we avoid mistakes that have been made before?
Okay, now yesterday in his opening speech, President Uhuru Kenyatta said that the same issues that were discussed in 1976 when Kenya first hosted the UNCTAD are still the same ones being discussed now. What are the challenges? Why are we discussing the same things? Are we not?
Okay, there are two levels. First of all, 1976 development was an issue. Today it's even more an issue. Today we are seeing slowing down gainful employment creation. We are seeing greater wealth concentration. We are seeing people turning their backs to internationalism in a bigger way than 1976. But the main thing that was saying that was the same issue really is the vulnerability of commodity-dependent countries. In 1976, Nairobi was the first major international conference to pass binding resolutions on how to deal with the vulnerability, the weakness of countries that depend on commodities, oil, minerals, coffee, tea, and so on. The ensuing 40 years saw some fairly positive growth in the prices of commodities, particularly the last 10-15 years. And that means that even developing countries, which are commodity dependent, did not see any problem, so they did not fix anything. They thought they were okay because of getting a lot of money from commodities. In the past 3 years, we've seen a collapse of the global price of commodities, and we have seen the deindustrialization of places like Latin America, which had become very, very strong industrially, going back to commodities. So again, after 40 years, the vulnerabilities of commodity-dependent economies is stuck with us, and Nairobi too becomes the earliest opportunity again to say, how can we help these economies diversify? And this is the agenda we're having this morning in the presidential round tables and with the heads of UN agencies that I'm hosting this morning.
Now, of course, you've served as a trade minister here in Kenya. What would you say is, what is our way out? Because, yes, we also do depend on commodities. Yeah, we sell our coffee, we sell our tea. What way out does Kenya have?
All right, there's an Arabic saying that I like very much, which is applicable to Kenya. If you are not aiming at any particular target, you can never miss when you shoot.
So you just try out anything?
Yeah, if you're just shooting in the dark, you can't miss your aim, your target. The first thing is purposeful action has to be guided by a sense of where you want to get. If we are ready to sacrifice the goal because of the means, like we do with projects, if you're in a country where you sacrifice an infrastructure project because of the benefits that come with selling real estate to the development of the project, you have no sense of direction. Now, where Kenya has reached, it should be leading in the African context at a clear, determined way of moving away from vulnerability, over dependence on subsistence agriculture, for example. First of all, mechanize agriculture, make it worthwhile, reduce the role of middlemen, improve on farm and off-farm storage, assist the mamamboga to connect to their market, see examples of how others have done it. This is the dialogue we're trying to bring to Nairobi. Secondly, countries in East Asia which have industrialized have less educated people than Kenya, have less natural resources than Kenya, have poorer geographical location compared to Kenya. There is no reason why Kenya should be exporting raw coffee today more than 50 years after independence. So you start saying, can we purposefully link research and development, innovation and production? Can we start doing things that we haven't been doing, that add value, that yield more from our labor? Can we be competitive to compete with the far-off lands in conquering the value-added market within Africa? This is the direction that I think Kenya should go. And this is a direction that will be presented by some leading thought leaders from around the world in the course of the next 4 days.
Yes. Now you talk, of course, about vulnerable economies, and Kenya surely definitely is one of them. And in the last few months, we've seen quite a number of high-profile leaders from big economies coming to Kenya. We had the Indian Prime Minister was the latest. Now, in terms of manufacturing, these are big economies. When we trade, you see the difference between Kenya and India in terms of trade, exports and imports. It's huge. Yes. Now, yet to see the Indian Prime Minister come and sign a few agreements with Kenya. Is there an opportunity for UNCTAD in such negotiations?
About 3 weeks before the visit of Prime Minister Modi to Kenya, I had a meeting in Geneva with the global CEO of Ashok Leyland, one of the leading heavy trucks and truck equipment moving company in the world. And he had been talking about expanding the assembly plant in Kenya for their trucks. And I told him, it is very, very important to understand that Kenya has gone beyond the point where you need assembly plants. What you want to do in Kenya is to set up a manufacturing plant for trucks, not an assembly. We have been doing that for 40, 50 years. That's not interesting news anymore. I am expecting a delegation from Ashok Leyland in Nairobi in the course of the World Investment Forum, which will be kicking off this afternoon. And I hope that the first steps towards the establishment of a truck manufacturing plant, the first in East Africa, will be announced in the course of this. So we in the back are encouraging both the investor and the host government. Think big, see the opportunities. People are coming to Nairobi. First of all, is a statement of a sense of return in security that VVIPs can come. Secondly, geographical location, and a very active international profile that has been positively cultivated over the past few years are making this a go-to destination even for global leaders. I know Cameroon had been very much hoping to come and did not been Brexited. But what is important is not so much that you're having people coming and you are taking pictures with visitors. It is how much can you leverage this into concrete confidence by long-term investors in infrastructure, in productive capacity, in R&D. These are the areas that Kenya should be going.
Are you therefore saying that even despite this high-level visits by top world leaders, Kenya could still be disadvantaged in terms of the deals we make with them?
Of course, you still are disadvantaged in many ways. You can see, you can have 10 leaders from Europe coming here, but until you sort out the nature of the economic partnership with Europe, Kenya remains still clouded in its path for continued exports and preference into the European market.
But surely now that's where UNCTAD comes in, because now you probably help emerging economies to understand better when they engage with these big economies.
The number of things. First of all, we train government officers on international trade negotiations. We assist governments in interpreting what offers are being put on the table, particularly by developed countries. We are helping developing countries to reform their investment agreements. You have a stock of investment agreements in this country today, which, if you look at them internationally, they are almost criminal. You promising largesse to investors who do not need it, which cripples the local competition to them. And we are saying we are helping people to get out of this kind of unfortunate situation. But having said that, a critical problem that you have is not that you lack experts in this country. Just like many African countries, policymakers are more comfortable listening to their political advisors, not technical advisors. They like the intrigues of people saying, you know, so and so is conspiring against you, so and so is a mole of God or of Jubilee. This excites the adrenaline, and it undermines the credibility of technical competence which you have, but which you underutilize. So we just try to point at why it's important to listen to your own experts, and then the rest belongs to the public sphere.
Okay, and still on that vein of big economies seeing Kenya as an investment destination, would you say there's a level of investment that is not necessarily positive that you can welcome all the investors, but it will not really benefit Kenya?
Of course. My organization over the past 2 years has been leading the world in exposing some of the vagaries of wrong investment. Our quantification, for example, in the year 2014, Africa lost through tax cheating, transfer pricing, misinvoicing, and other illicit transfers, mostly to tax havens, from investing companies, as much money as they received in foreign direct investment.
So we received half?
So we could just be in standstill position if they stopped stealing from us without giving us any more money. Now, we're not saying that FDI should not come in, but it's as important to find ways of stemming illicit transfers, sometimes with political complicity, as it is to attract new investments. And this has both to do with the kind of companies and investments they are doing, but also with the kind of regime of investment agreements you enter, which allow for transfer pricing.
Yes. Yeah. Now, of course, there's the issue of debt. And African economies, and Kenya included. We always hear the president has signed a new debt financing deal, this Eurobond, and we as a citizenry do get scared at times.
Yeah, you have reason to be scared. First of all, it's important to set out the principle. Properly managed and adequately utilized to build productivity. Borrowing, even on non-concessional markets, is a positive thing that governments do all the time. What comes as trouble is two things. One, the non-concessionary bond markets do not have something called debt forgiveness.
You have to pay.
You have to pay is like borrowing money and gambling inside a casino.
Yes.
There is nothing like forgive me, I have poverty at home. It's none of their business. Secondly, bond market investors are speculators. For example, if the Federal Reserve in the US raises interest rates, they tell you, unless you pay me higher interest rates than what we agreed, I'll withdraw my money and invest in more secure, more guaranteed treasury bonds immediately. So pressure comes, you must increase interest rates above the ones you agreed at the start. The third component is, even well-managed economies can start hitting headwinds that were not anticipated. For example, if you are Angola or Zambia, you borrowed money because you projected you are going to make so much money exporting oil and copper. And then overnight, the price of these commodities declines by 70%. You are in a struggle. Even if you had been a prudent manager, you are now having problems servicing your debt. And what we are going to do in the debt discussions in the Nairobi conference over the next 4 days is demonstrate how some countries in Africa, including Kenya, are walking down the path that Latin America walked down, and the destination is not pleasant.
So you do agree the debt problem in Kenya is a big problem?
Debt problem across the world is a serious problem. Because of the vulnerabilities of developing countries to uncertainties in the environment, because of the speculative nature of hedge bond investors, who are the main drivers of the Eurobond and other such functions, because of borrowing money to use on recurrent expenditure. Expensively borrowed money should be for something that produces more value than the borrowed interest rates. But if you borrow and you use for current expenditure, that's the wrong way to go, whether you are US or you are Kenya.
Yes, and of course this conference comes hot on the heels of Brexit, and also something similar in East Africa that has been going on, the EPA that Tanzania refused to sign. Now, what does that portend for Kenya?
No, those are totally unrelated things. What we see in Brexit is one phenomenon, that globalization has started having problems in Europe and America. When there is extreme wealth being created, but it is concentrated in fewer and fewer hands, the middle class is shrinking, the wages of labor are remaining stagnant. So people are angry, but rightist opportunists, demagogues, are playing up that anger and fear and starting to construct, what we call nativism, which is that we are protecting the indigenous people of here, not everybody who is citizen. The indigenous people of here are the ones who are protecting, and the world is threatening us. So you try to vote your back to the world. That's what Brexit is all about. They are exploiting anger, but they don't have a clear vision of where they take the people when they free them from the establishment. As for East Africa, I've been mentioning this over and over again. East Africa regional integration was not started because of negotiating economic partnership with Europe. It was revived because of the strength it brings to East African economies and people. We have to separate those two. So even if we disagree on EPAs, East Africa's interests and sticking together are by far much more important than whether we are reading from the same page on economic partnership agreement. At one level, you can understand why Tanzania is hesitant, because Tanzania, Uganda, Burundi and Rwanda have unlimited market access to European Union as LDCs, whether they sign an EPA or not. So in this regard, the only country that is immediately under pressure to sign an EPA is Kenya. And Kenya is saying, we cannot negotiate a regime where I open my market to Europeans without Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi and Tanzania agreeing with me when we are in a common market. In fact, it's even ridiculous and silly for European Union to ask Kenya to sign a free trade agreement, a bilateral agreement,
without involving
its partners in a common market, because it means you are exposing the neighbors to unaccustomed goods from a party to which they have not signed. So, to my mind, there are two sides to it. One, that the concerns of Tanzania and Uganda to be addressed before Kenya can move on towards signing an EPA. And two, for Kenya to convince Brussels that it's ridiculous for you to try to rush me when I have neighbors who are hesitant. Help to address the hesitations of my neighbors before you give me deadlines of economic partnership agreement.
So definitely there's much more to gain in multilateralism as opposed to just one country engaging another directly.
I mean, the thing is, if East Africa negotiates with Britain, for example, as East Africa, we are so many people, and Britain is only 64 million people. Its power is reduced compared to when it was part of a 500 million group called European Union. So we can demand more concession from Britain as East Africa than we could demand of it via Brussels. On the other side, if Kenya alone stands to speak with Europe, it cannot raise its voice too much. You are a much smaller economy. You are much more vulnerable. So the larger a group you are, the more you negotiate on a wholesale market. The fewer you are, the more you are exposed to the weakness of a retail market.
Okay, excuse me. Back to the UNCTAD conference, and of course on the sidelines there'll be a lot of deals that are going to be made. And I saw some figures somewhere that is it 1.4 trillion shillings worth of trade was discussed at the previous conference.
Not discussed. This afternoon I'll be opening the Global World Investment Forum, which is bringing together very substantial investors, people with deep pockets looking for opportunities and partnerships. The last World Investment Forum I hosted in Geneva 2 years ago, there were transactions, agreements, deals worth $14 billion
between countries,
which is 1.4 trillion shillings. Countries and companies. We are creating the platform in Nairobi for a similar exercise, and we hope that this is one of the areas where the greatest benefit to the Kenyan economy from this conference will come.
And who exactly stands to benefit directly?
There are different things. First of all, there are deals between investors and governments. You can get a government and investing company that's ready to do business with Kenya government with concessional financing for infrastructure projects, for example. So government can directly benefit from that. But at another level, you have investors who are looking for local business partners, or local struggling enterprises to infuse new capital as an investment and shareholding, local opportunities to start greenfield projects. So this represents the economy benefiting, direct local partners benefiting. So there's a multiplicity of possible beneficiaries.
I have one more question for you, but before that, let's take a look at probably the program for the UNCTAD opening, the UNCTAD 14 conference. Yesterday there was the opening gala. Today the World Leaders Summit Roundtable of Heads of Agencies, paving the way for 2030. After that, you'll have a youth forum tent, and probably about the youth, how do they stand to benefit from this conference?
It's part of my legacy that for the first time I've introduced within the context of UNCTAD's 4-year conference a youth forum. So this is the first time it's been done. And my logic is just straightforward. Agenda 2030 represents a collective commitment by governments of the world that they will make conditions so that by the year 2030, there is nobody who is extremely poor anywhere in the world. That all people will have access to basic infrastructure, social services, education, decent housing, and so on. Governments today are making plans, are allocating public budget resources, are borrowing from abroad and locally from the private market in the name of Agenda 2030. Now, the thing is, if you are designing prosperity for 2030, those designing today as government will not be there to take responsibility for their decisions. You can have people over-borrowing money on expensive markets today in the name of Agenda 2030. They will retire or even physically expire before 2030. And the heirs of their promise will be people inheriting a debt.
Yes.
So our argument is, let the owners of the future prefect the process of commitments and practices in the name of Agenda 2030. Let them hold governments to account today on, are you doing a sound thing in keeping the promise to us, or you are burdening us with debts because of recklessness today in the name of Agenda 2030.
Okay.
We will mainstream the resolutions of youth which have been actively developed globally through virtual meetings on the internet, and which will now be articulated clearly at the youth tents, where we are having about 500 participants from the whole world, with of course the largest delegation by far coming from Kenya.
Okay. And of course they're going to, whatever resolutions they make will be included in the final resolution of the UNCTAD
both
meeting.
Civil society and youth, their resolutions are presented to the main negotiating team. They'll be part of the official declaration and document of the United Nations.
Okay, and as you mentioned, the civil society involvement as well, there's a session for that, interaction with civil society. Then there's a launch of the Development Globalization Facts and Figures. I think that's a document.
Yes, this afternoon in Nairobi, I'll be launching the first report ever in the world since the agreement of Agenda 2030 in New York last year, which is quantifying, giving statistics of the gap between what we promised and where we are, and how much work has to be done. This is the first report of its nature in the world.
Okay.
The next one will come from the UN DESA, which is the United Nations Office for Development in the Economic and Social Council in New York.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, given that this conference comes after maybe 4 years, and Kenya has already done it twice.
This is the second time.
Is it a coincidence, or are we benefiting from the fact that the Secretary General comes from here?
The latter.
Yeah, the latter.
Partly. But also that the fact that I came from here gave me a sense of the possibilities that Nairobi could host it on such short notice after Peru struggled because of some major issues that they could not be able to keep the promise anymore. But then I had a sense, I had to engage government, and so there has been very active engagement with both the President and Minister Amina Mohammed, through which we managed to get to the point that we could present the case before the United Nations General Membership, and the members accepted Kenya's hosting.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much for that, but before you leave, I still have to ask you one question. I know your term...
my hashtag has to be given to your voters.
Yes, yeah, you can use the Twitter handle UNCTAD Kituyi. That's Bwana Kituyi's Twitter handle. Yes, and my final question is, of course, your term as Secretary General for UNCTAD ends next year. Yes, you are eligible for a 4-year term. Are you hoping to seek to go for another term?
I have, yes, my term is ending next year. There's a fairly good chance that I should get a second term. In 52 years, all my predecessors have served 2 terms.
Okay. So
if I exit next year, I'll be the first in the history of the organization to go after 4 years. So it's almost averagely 8 years.
If at all you could get the second term, but if at all you just get to serve only 1 term, are you hoping to come back to Kenyan politics?
Whether I serve 1 term or 2 terms, I'll come back to Kenya. So that's go back to politics.
Sure.
I've been asked that question very many times. I don't know which Kenya politics to come to. You know, these funny things that I see laid on the parliamentary altercations do not excite me at all.
Probably go for the biggest job.
I don't know about that. I'm comfortable where I am. I'm watching what you're doing. I remain very much intensely a political person, but I'm not making any commitments of any nature.
Okay.
Yeah.
So asante sana. All the best for the remainder of your term, and hopefully you will be given a second term. That has been Dr. Mukhisa Kituyi, the Secretary General of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, helping us understand exactly what is happening in Nairobi. Of course, the 14th session of the UNCTAD, it's UNCTAD, yes, is kicked off yesterday. It's a week-long event, and of course, that's why we are seeing all this traffic disruptions. A number of roads have been closed, but as he says, it's all for a good cause. We'll now take a short break. We'll be back with more.